Let me start out by saying that this is not a theory video. It is a speculation video. The difference being that a theory video is like pretty much when you have an idea and you're trying to explain why that idea holds water. A speculation video is when you have thoughts and ideas and are just kind of throwing them out there. Could be this, could be that, this looks odd. And I clarify this because the last time I broached this topic, I was kind of jumping the gun. I saw the Mimic, or Jackie, looking like the puppet, and I said, yeah, okay, Mimic's becoming the puppet now. But now with the new trailer and looking at it a little closer and everything we know, I am noticing that the suspicious amount of hints that the Mimic is connected to the puppet are steadily increasing. And a finding in this recent trailer has sort of tipped that over. Like a tiger plush being handed through a puppet drawer, we see connections that may or may not be there. This is not a theory video, but it's looking like the secret of the Mimic is that it was the puppet the whole time. Let me explain. But to explain, I have to cover a few things. The recent increased interest in the puppet, the behaviors of the Mimic and its connections to the puppet, and then what we saw in the trailer. It's more than just the Mimic looks like a puppet variation now. Let's start with the puppet. The puppet doesn't need any introduction. It was a major character in the early years of Fnaf, being the haunted prize puppet who acted a little different than the others, being behind the animatronics being possessed, being more aware, and being a self-proclaimed protector of the others. It is even shown in the earlier games that the puppet was the one who put the kids in the suits, which, since this was between 1 and 2, was alluded to be shoving the kids' bodies into the animatronic costumes. Behavior that the other animatronics later reflected on the night guards. I've heard that recently it was said in a book that Afton stuffed the kids into the suits, but I don't know what book, and that is a problem, because if it was the original trilogy, the puppet didn't exist, so Afton would have had to have done it. The games show him just leaving the bodies all over the place. Someone was shoving bodies into suits. Let's leave it at that. As for where the puppet comes from, we do not know. The earliest puppet we see is the security puppet mounted inside of a building that was likely Fredbear's family diner, where it was involved in the death of Charlie, the daughter of Henry, the former business partner of William, the original murderer. Charlie was murdered out front or behind the diner and dumped around back. The security puppet, who was set to monitor her security bracelet, wandered outside and found her behind the building. Breaking down from the rain, but still hovering, mind you, it crawled to her body and collapsed. At this point, Charlie possessed the puppet, and this led to the haunting of the pizzeria and all that happened with the animatronics. Assumedly, it was refurbished after the breakdown to look a little more like the puppet we remember. And the rest is history until it burned in a fire staged by Henry to end Freddy's and free the remaining souls, and to finally stop William. The games suggest that's where Charlie moved on. The books suggest the puppet survived, though oddly enough there was suddenly like a lot more voices inside of it. That's very concerning but unimportant, as it died in a lake shortly afterwards. So that's the story of the puppet and where it unexpectedly stopped. See, the puppet was a major character up until that point, and after that, it noticeably started having less appearances. There were no further puppet variations, it didn't appear in Fnaf AR, even though every other toy did. It had a very tiny split-second cameo in the Fazbear Fright series. It was a pretty big drop of importance. It appeared in some spin-offs, though. And then, suddenly, the puppet's becoming relevant again. I mean, of course it is. Why else release a teaser for the Help Wanted 2 Switch port with the puppet mask, despite the fact that the puppet isn't physically in the game? You could have had Monty in that teaser and it might have made more sense. But that's not the only example. That's just a picture I have on hand. This game also surprisingly suggests that the puppet was not the first animatronic possessed, but the last, which, knowing what we do, doesn't seem to make much sense. This is shown with the memory doll puzzle, where you have to light the fires at the graves in a specific order. With Chica first, Chica the
First, I have seen everything.
chicken. Now, this and the increased appearances in merch could easily be explained by the fact that the FNAF 2 movie is coming out this year, and it, being called Music Box, is to feature the puppet as a major character. But then something happened. The first Secret of the Mimic teaser came out, featuring an old-timey wind-up box playing the puppet's familiar tune in similar coloring and similar opening styles. And the thing that popped out was, by all accounts, a puppet of some kind, from the white mask to its grinning smile. This is Jackie, and also the Mimic, and possibly the puppet. But let me briefly explain Mimic. No, you know who the Mimic is. I didn't need to tell you who the puppet was, to save the fact that it's been a while and I felt like it. So let me keep this brief. The Mimic is an animatronic built to compulsively mimic. It will mimic anything. It has a temper, and it's hard to tell how much of what it does is from programming and how much is from that temper. It has glowing yellow eyes that can appear as shrunken yellow dots in costumes. It is said to be able to contort to fit any size animatronic costume, and most importantly for now, it was being holed up in a pizzeria underneath the Pizzeria Simulator Pizzeria underneath the Pizzaplex, and has been down there for a long time, despite Henry not mentioning it at all. He should have known it was there, right? Well, maybe. That's not really important, but remember that. Alright, so it's starting to look like there's a chunky connection between the Mimic and the puppet, and it's not just Jackie. Though to be frank, Jackie slowly deconstructing into a puppet throughout Secret of the Mimic does do the idea favors. Let's start with the timing. Secret of the Mimic is taking place in 1979, after assumedly the Mimic has either gone rogue or is in the process of doing so, when Fredbear's Family Diner is still active, and a few years before Charlie's death at the diner. We do not know where the puppet came from. In fact, the puppet being a hovering animatronic who manages security is absolutely baffling in the 1980s. But we do see more advanced animatronics in Edwin's factory, and in fact, it seems like Murray's Manor is a primary supplier to Fredbear's Family Diner, considering that they have posters plastered on their walls. We know from the books that Henry built the original spring-lock suits, but we don't know where he had them upholstered, assuming he didn't do so himself. And there's no confirmation anywhere that he made the puppet, considering that its origin dates back so far. With the Manor being a costume-themed establishment with doll and toy animatronics boasting masks on its door, and with an animatronic that reflects the puppet greatly, I don't think it would be a large stretch to say that it is very possible that the puppet, the odd one out who never seemed to fit in seamlessly with the Freddy characters, is probably from here. Which would mean that likely the security puppet who found Charlie was acquired from this factory. It could have been altered by Henry to make it a security puppet to watch his daughter, but at least the shell probably came from here, and with a 4-year gap between Secret of the Mimic and Charlie's death, it could have shown up at any given time. Now let's go into the eyes situation. This one is a little more vague, but I think it's worth bringing up. Animatronic eyes shifting is something that has been common in the Fnaf series since the beginning. In early Fnaf, there were screens in-game where you could see the animatronic's eyes darkened out. Withered Bonnie's eyes are removed and we only see red lights in the back. Same with Glamrock Freddy. The puppet has darkened out eyes that occasionally light up with white pupils. We see this most noticeably in Fnaf 2, when it's scanning Freddy's face, and in Fnaf 3. And in a lot of spin-off games where the pupils are given to make it a little more expressive or softer. These eyes make the puppet look a little more aware. Golden Freddy is also shown to have these pupils too sometimes. I don't think it means that these two are the same characters. I think it's a sign of possession. And you may say that counteracts what I'm going for with the Mimic, but I agree, but I'm banking on Fnaf not being consistent on little details, which it isn't. Fnaf often changes small details, and it's the fanbase who really chooses which matter and which don't. Like, for example, Roxy's endoskeleton changes in Ruin, Sun gets a new Faz wrench port, and Springtrap entirely changed in between 3 and Pizzeria Simulator. But the addition of the prototype on Ruined Freddy's foot proves that he's a different character, despite Vanessa saying there's no other Freddy suits at the Pizzaplex. A quick call out to Steelwool. I appreciate you confirming Glitchtrap being dead. Thank you, that gives us a lot to work with. If you could, maybe you could just clear up the Glamrock Freddy thing. Odds are Ruined Freddy is not coming back, so I don't think it would be like that detrimental to the lore. I think it would just be something that we kind of could use clarification on. But back to the point, or circling around it some more, the mimic. Despite common belief, the mimic's eyes are not red or yellow. They actually change color. Sometimes they are reddish orange, sometimes they glow in yellow, and it has cut mascot eyes that are yellow and small, which were then used in Withered Jackie, which is what I'll call Puppet Jackie. In The Secret of the Mimic trailer, we see the mascots have coil eyes, which come in yellow and red too, and these are either the mimic's eyes, or there's other animatronics who have these eyes, and the real mimics are unique. If they are mimic's eyes, then what do you know, the whole detail thing changing came back again. Notably, interestingly, in Ruin, mimic's eyes are actually focused in a dot of light. The eye around it glows, but it has this dotted glowing pupil in the center. But these eye details are relatively small, and the timing is only noticeable if you look at the big picture and take in the multitude of similarities between Jackie and the puppet. Which, if I may run through them again really quickly, they both have a white mask. Jackie's looks like a face, but with the hair gone, it is more like a mask. They have a wide smile, sit in a blue box that plays My Grandfather Clock. It's never specified if the music box is literally the puppet's box or a separate object, and work on Jack-in-the-Box mechanics. And if we go by Jackie, Jackie has green eyes, and the security puppet originally too had green eyes. Though we're not sure how much altering went on there. Once you peel back the clown, there's a puppet underneath. But all of this only shows off similarities in designs. It's small in the grand scheme. However, there is one giant piece of circumstantial evidence that suddenly makes this all a little too similar. Something I missed out in The Secret of the Mimic trailer, because it was too dark for me to see, is that there is a scene of someone stuffed into a suit. There is an arm dangling out of the elephant's, where its arm is removed, and assuming that this is a human, it's not a prop, and they weren't attacked while wearing the costume, it's possible and believed currently that the mimic stuffed it inside, and that's where all the bodies of all the missing workers are, stuffed inside of the mascots. That the mimic is stuffing people into suits. Now, the original animatronics did this plenty, but why? Fazbear Entertainment cooked up a story that this was because they thought the night guards were endoskeletons, but we know better. We know it was because they were haunted and lashing out. And we know who encouraged them to do this. The puppet, who wakes them from their stage, or at least Freddy himself, leads him towards the purple man, telling him to save them, being the children. The puppet in its voice line says that the others are like animals, and that it is aware. It is quite literally the puppet master calling the shots. And it is extremely likely that it was what initially stuffed the children's bodies into the suits. Give gifts, give life. After all, someone did. We see a shorthand account of this in the minigames. We know Afton dumped bodies all over the place, and we know the animatronics started to stuff afterwards. Likely the puppet was the one who did this, and the mimic was doing it before the puppet was even around. And that's when you start to take a good look, not at the mimic, but at the puppet, and start thinking, gee, was it really trying to save the others and be their protector? Or was it only mimicking someone who wanted to? I am not theorizing that the mimic is the puppet. I am playing Clue, and I marked 4 of the 6 suspects off the list, and I'm pretty sure it went down in the dining room with the lead pipe. I am saying that everything is lining up in a very noticeable way. What secret could the mimic present that would be bigger than him being there the whole time? Reflecting Eleanor, another mimic whose gimmick was that in the final hour she was revealed to have been there the whole time, pretending to be other animatronics. But I think the better question is, how did the mimic get into the pizzeria simulator pizzeria? Henry never mentions the mimic anywhere. Not only that, he doesn't, as far as we know, have the mimic inside the containment maze with the other animatronics set to burn. It just serendipitously happened to be there, and Henry decided leaving it underneath the pizzeria would be fine. Or alternatively, he didn't know about it because the mimic was feeling particularly docile and decided to quietly sit in the basement and not bother with Henry's plans at all. Or he was. He was in that basement maze. Henry just didn't know it, because he used the contortionist body of his and had been hanging out in plain sight the whole time. The possibility here is that the mimic was inside of the puppet the entire time, or at least the security puppet shown in the minigame in Pizzeria Simulator. That what happened was this. Murray's Costume Manor works in close ties with Fredbear's Family Diner. They build toys, animatronics, and mascots for them. Not just suits, it seems like they might also actually put stuff into them. Something happens to Edwin. The game says he left, but there's a possibility that there's like a secret twist that he's still there or dead. Either way, Edwin's gone, and the main character, Secret of the Mimic, is sent in to claim the Mimic. He either fails, thinks he succeeds but actually the Mimic gets away, or he does succeed and the Mimic is reassigned. I think the Mimic does get away, and this man is the person behind the Mexis before Vanessa gets involved with it. And in his escape, the Mimic leaves the factory as the security puppet and winds up at Fredbear's. The events of Charlie's murder then occurs, and what follows next is one of two things. Either Charlie possesses the puppet and takes control of it, leading to the Mimic 2 being controlled and not active the entire time, or just goes with the flow. Or she doesn't, and the Mimic just starts mimicking her now. During this time, it witnesses Afton's murders and creates more life by shoving bodies into suits, as it already is shown to do so. Then, eventually, Pizzeria Simulator happens. Henry sets fire to everything, and afterwards the Mimic climbs back out of the puppet and, I suppose, hangs out in the pizzeria for a while. If the Fazbear Frights epilogues are canon, the puppet's mask is still haunted, but the Mimic could have just taken that off and moved on. No longer held back by that performance or possession, the Mimic is free to go cosplay as someone else. Then Fazbear Entertainment makes the baffling decision to somehow bury the entire pizzeria under the Pizzaplex. Mimic, for some reason, remains dormant until whatever happens before security breach. And you're probably wondering how Glitchtrap's involved in this, and all I can say is, I don't know and I couldn't tell you. All I know is that in the Daco interview, it was confirmed that Glitchtrap was destroyed by Vanny, and yet Mimic still remains. And because of that, I don't think it's really important what Glitchtrap's deal was, at least not in this discussion. It's obvious Mimic will hop into anyone. Well, what makes that rabbit so special? So, yeah, there's a big shining example of what the actual Secret of the Mimic could be and why there's so many puppet references. Assuming the increased focus isn't just because of the movie and that this is like some sort of Year of Luigi thing for the Marionette. It still looks very suspicious. Coincidental, but suspicious. Almost as suspicious as the Tiger Rock plush being handed out through the puppet memory doll's drawer, which could mean nothing at all, but also happens to be right here instead of anywhere else in the game. Noticeable. That's kind of all of these hints. That's exactly how all of these hints are. It could mean nothing, but it's also in a very specific spot. Another possibility that I love to bring up is the two puppet theory, which started as a joke theory, but now I found myself mentioning it quite a bit. That this puppet and this puppet aren't the same. And in this case, the Mimic would be the initial puppet who ran into Charlie, and the FNAF 2 puppet would assumedly be the one that somehow came out at the tail end of the missing children incident. FNAF has really been playing up the there were 6 victims, not 5 thing recently, so I wonder if that's why the order changed. We'll have to wait until the Secret of the Mimic to see. Like I said, this isn't a theory video, it's a wow, there's another point in concerningly puppet-like territory video. I think it's obviously too soon to tell because, the game's not out yet, but I just wanted to talk about this because this is the only time we can. Once the game's out, we'll probably know, so there's that. At the very least, it's 2 birds with 1 stone. I get to talk about the puppet, and we get to talk about Secret of the Mimic, which everyone's all abuzz about because of the trailer. As for how I would feel about this, the Mimic as the puppet reveal if it came about, I was very against it before, but thinking now, I think it depends on what the actual conclusion is. If it's that the Mimic was in the puppet, but Charlie was still in control, or that there were 2 separate puppets, then the puppet's characterization is still left intact, and I think I can live with that pretty fine. Plus, who knows, maybe we could have like a puppet versus Mimic showdown at some point. If it comes out that the puppet was effectively not real, as the Mimic was it, and mimicking the whole time, I think I would certainly not like that. I would probably get really salty about that. Personally, I think establishing the Mimic as a character we've already grown attached to make him more important is already not a great idea. I got on Eleanor for the same reason, though I think Eleanor's was done way worse because it was just so janky. Like, we have 5 epilogues of Afton and Andrew build up, and then it just swaps to Eleanor in one quick tidbit. This obviously would be more laid out, but I'm not sure if it would pay off the possible disillusionment it would cause to the lore. But these are just thoughts on a plot point that may or may not be real, that we won't know about until June anyways. But we'll get there eventually. Anyways, hope I entertained you for a little while, and thank you for watching.